Let me see if I can think of something from when we were working on feats in Otacon. I haven't really told many stories from that time period. I try to block it out of my mind for the most part. Uh, um, so, uh, I think I've told a little bit of this. I haven't told the whole story. So when I was working on feats of strength, there was a version where the outputs of feats, or like the outputs of the system, which was not quite feats yet, it was a little different at the time, were potions that you could get. Some of them gave like permanent buffs or like changed the map in certain areas in specific ways. I've talked previously about the potion of ice that just left a permanent slow patch on the ground that only slowed your enemies, and people would just put it in their enemy's mid lane, like by their inhibitor turret, and it would slow them down as they tried to like leave base, which was really funny. One of the ones I tried was called the potion of HEX-SMUGGLIng, which lets you just place a hex gate anywhere you want it on the map. Like the entrance would be placed where you were, and the exit would be placed in your chosen direction 3,000 units away. So the potion of HEX-SMUGGLIng was like, legitimately, I promise you, when I started like working on the script, I really didn't think it would work. I was legitimately like, there's no way this is going to work, like script-wise. It's going to take me so long, but just in case it like works out well, let me just try it. And the Hexgate script, which was made by Captain Gameplay, is actually really good. It worked instantly. Now, did it crash people sometimes in playtests? Yes. But it did work most of the time, and once the Hexgate was placed and people, got back from their crash, it worked perfectly well. So the placeable Hexgate was pretty fun. It was something where, like, the gameplay was so cool, but I would have needed to figure out, like, how do I limit it? Because ultimately, like, one of the things that caused me to cut that, even when we were still working on the potion version, where, like, you got some kind of elixir or whatever, or, like, one-time effect, was I didn't have a good way of saying, like, multiple people can't buy this. Like, I would have needed a system where it was like, okay, only one of these can be bought per game. Because one of the things that immediately happened was, like, I put this in, and then in one of the gap tests, they like, I get sent a recording of, like, 3 people on the same team bought it, and they set up this, like, Hexgate network where they, like, Hexgate directly to the Baron pit from their base or whatever. And it was like, I was like, oh god, like, that can't be legal. Like, like, that can't be allowed. I can't let you have multiples of this Hexgate that you can place on the map, because you could just chain them and just, like, within 5 seconds be, like, pretty much anywhere on the map. So that like caused me to cut it. But, like, tech wise, it was surprisingly good. Like, I've always been really impressed by the Hexgate script. It's very robust. It works very well. Not attached to specific locations. Any of that stuff. So, yeah, I think I would have needed to make it limited, like 1 per game or maybe 1 per team or something like that. It's the kind of thing that was cool enough that at any point in the future, if we're ever looking for, like, what's a really, really cool thing we could give to one player, I would pitch that. Like, on the spot, I'd be like, you should let them place a Hexgate. It's so cool. And it's like, it's a little degenerate in some cases, but most of the use cases we found for it were, like, pretty reasonable. Especially because I let enemies use it as well. So, like, a lot of the locations you could place it in where it's like, oh my god, you can, make a rotation from Dragon to Baron so quickly. It's like, okay, well, your opponents can also do that now. It's like, so that's probably fine, right? I think Grubs plus Otacon, extra objectives, kill top agency, split pushing. I don't think that's the case, because I don't really think top agency has been in a good spot since, like, season 2. I do not personally think, as someone who's played a lot of top lane, but is ultimately at heart a Phil player, I do not personally think that top agency has been in a good place basically since the popularity of TP rose up. TP did add top agency in some ways, but it also took it away in a lot of others, right? It made it much harder to snowball your lane. Some interesting fact about top lane in the data that I've looked at over the years, and this, like, again, keep in mind, take this with some don't take this as, like, fact at face value, because this is old data. I haven't looked at this data in, like, probably over a year at this point. But over historical data, I used to pay attention to this. Top lane is the role where, if you get a very large lead in the current game, or I guess not current game, in the game of years, at least a couple of years ago, again, I haven't looked at this data recently, you were most likely to win. However, getting that lead is very hard. It's one of the roles that's least likely to generate what we consider like a like meaningful lead where it affects like the win rate of the game. And the threshold of lead that you would need to be meaningful for top is much larger than the other roles, right? Like if you're up 400 gold as AD carry, that actually gives you real meaningful increases to your win percentage in the game. For top lane, that is not, or at least was not true like 2 years ago when I was looking at this data quite a bit. It's very interesting, right? And I think one of the things that contributes to the fact that top lane has very low agency is that in like most people, large percentage of games involve teleport, which is why when you get a small lead, it often doesn't matter. Top lane is so disconnected from the rest of the map that you need this really, really, really big lead in order to actually enforce your will on the game. Now, I'm not saying that the proliferation of more objectives made top lane's agency higher. I don't think it did. But I don't look at Otacon and Grubs and stuff like that and say, like, these reduce top lane agency in a meaningful way. I say, I think top lane was already low agency before we added these, and it's, I think, roughly equally low agency now. Split pushing from top lane, I think, is less good now, right? In some ways, right? In some ways, it's better, right? Like, you have Grubs, so there's some things you can do today that you wouldn't have been able to do pre-Grubs, which, that can be nice. But overall, I think top lane is and has for a very long time been a very low agency role.
What about Seraphine, who's now balanced from support? Great point, right? I was just talking about how, like, it's not bad if your character goes into another lane, and then, naturally the Seraphine player comes in and is like, what about my character, who's balanced around another lane now? One of the things that we'll do is we will balance characters around the roles that they have players. And so in regards to Seraphine, she pretty much was never truly a mid laner in terms of having a play rate. Now, did we design her to be a mid? Yes. Did she come out and did some players play her mid? Yes, 100%. But basically, for the vast majority of Seraphine's existence, she has been played heavily in support compared to her other roles. And then her second most popular role for the vast majority of her existence has actually never been mid. It's been bot lane. Again, except for immediately after release, there was more mid lanes then. And so Seraphine prevents this complex issue, which is, there's a vocal minority of players who enjoy Seraphine mid, and that's totally valid. Like, if that's where you like her, that's where you like her. Nothing wrong with that. But the vast majority of players who play Seraphine play her in support or secondarily as a bot lane AP carry. And so why do we bounce Seraphine around support? It's because that's where the majority of our players are. And then, back to what I was talking about, this was where the negative result can come for roles, where it's like, if we do have to balance your character around a specific role, that's where it can get rough, because it's just like, oh, that means I can't play them in the role I wanted to. But the difference between Zed jungle versus mid and Seraphine support versus mid is Seraphine support was much more popular mid. I mean, not mid. Seraphine support was much more popular in support, and so we balanced it around that. And she never really had much of a play rate in mid. Comparatively, Zed jungle, right now, despite being powerful, is still his second most played role, right? He's still, primarily a mid laner. And yet there's, some folks who have this perception that because he can be played jungle, he's bad mid now, and you can't play him mid. And it's like, well, that's not really the case here. He's still totally fine mid, and you can play him mid, even if he does exist in the jungle. And, is there a future where, Zed, has to be giga nerfed for jungle, and, we basically delete him from mid lane? I don't think that's going to happen, but, if that happened, yes, that would suck. That would not be great for Zed. But that's not the reality right now.